Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And I'm Marissa Selvig.
Yeah.
And we are the FAIRtax
FAIRtax gang.
Plus one today.
We're the FAIRtax gang.
The
FAIRtax gang.
I like that. That's got a nice ring to it.
We're the posse.
That works really well. As so
use all those hip terms that people our age don't know much about.
All right. Well, some of you may recognize Marissa. She's been with us before. Now, Marissa, you haven't met Scarborough yet, have you?
I have not.
Well, you have now.
Yes, I have.
It's a pleasure to see you two on the Zoom screen. It's really great.
Yes.
Thank you for being the first candidate to sign the FAIRtax Pledge. You'll go down in history because, you won't go down in history. You'll actually go up in history because people will always say, well, who was that first person? You'll be a trivia question at some point, I'm sure. Who was
I hope so, especially once we get the FAIRtax passed.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
closer than you've ever been, I think.
As a little further bit of introduction, I love that video that you did with your then 13-year-old when you first signed on with a FAIRtax. I guess she's 14 now. That was about a year ago. And but
she's almost 15, actually.
Almost. Okay. Well, I want to roll that thing right here. I just think this is brilliant. Let's roll that.
Hi, I'm Marissa Selvig, and I am running for Congress here in the great state of Wyoming. And I just signed the FAIRtax Pledge because I want to work hard to get that passed. And do you know why? This is one of my children. She is 13. And what would you like to do when you get a job someday?
Keep my money.
That's right, keep her money. So let's get it passed. Be blessed and stay free.
That still makes me laugh every time I see it. The FAIRtax, simple enough for a 13-year-old to understand that it lets you keep your money.
Right.
Yeah, it's a simple concept. I think people are concerned about change just in general. You go revolutionary and they go, whoa, wait a minute. And you have to sort of ease into it. I think people are now more tuned in to a change in the way our taxes are collected than they've ever been because of the current state of affairs in our country.
I say that there's a lot of things I want to go over with you, Marissa, but let me just kind of start off with a variant of the question I asked Steve Hayes a couple of weeks ago. You've been out there campaigning for well over a year now, which involves talking to people, listening to people, understanding what's on their minds, what they're concerned about. And I'm thinking that the current administration has given the FAIRtax a tremendous boost with this 87,000 new IRS agent army that's going to be unleashed on the American taxpayer. And I'm curious, from your point of view, you've been out there talking to people all the time. Draw me a before and after picture, if you will, of how the FAIRtax message of getting rid of the IRS is resonating with people before this announcement and after this came out.
Well, it's really interesting because I feel that people are still getting to know what the FAIRtax is. And part of that, when I share with people before, they were like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more. And now when I tell people about it, they go, that sounds really fantastic. I hate the IRS. So that is the real difference. I am still in the process of educating people all about the FAIRtax, and they are getting a little more receptive to it. I am almost out of palm cards, and so that's a good sign.
I will send you some more palm cards.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I would love that because people do take them. I put them on the table wherever I go. When I have some in my purse, often when I'm out campaigning at festivals, and if people want one, I will give them one. And the word is getting out. And I know you talked about, who was it? Marjorie Taylor Greene said something about the FAIRtax recently.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said let's get rid of this thing and pass the FAIRtax. I says, well, if you co-sponsor the bill, that would be nice. But
I know.
Always happy to have anybody with that kind of national profile, as polarizing as she can be.
Right.
At least bringing it into the conversation.
Correct. And that's the biggest goal, is to get people talking about it.
Absolutely. Marissa, let me ask you a question that relates to conversations that you have with the everyday in your everyday contact. What is the number one thing that you hear that is the hurdle that people have to get over in their understanding of the fair tax to where they will say, I'm in? In other words, is it a confusion about the prebate? Is it my friends don't understand it and they've told me not to like it until they understand it? Or what's the number one thing that you get when you're in conversations with folks that they don't understand it?
Well, I always have to go over the idea of how is Social Security and going to get funded. That is the big question. And for me as a constitutionalist, I think that we need to reform Social Security because it's not constitutional. But that is people's biggest concern, is how are we going to make sure that our payroll taxes are going to what they're supposed to if we're not paying them anymore. And so there's always a big discussion around how that's going to go into the general budget, and we won't have to worry about that. And that kind of eases their concerns about where that funding is going to come from. That is usually the biggest question that I have from people. It's not the prebate. They think that's very interesting. I love talking to Democrats about the fair tax and using the word progressive. It makes Republicans that I talk to go, ooh, and it makes Democrats go, hmm. So it's you got
to use the proper terminology.
Yeah, but it is the right word. It is a progressive tax.
Wyoming's a pretty red state. How many Democrats have you been able to bring over? I'm curious.
Well, I don't know how many people I'm bringing over, but education is my goal. So whether I'm bringing them over or not, I'm talking to them about it, and it's making them think about the current system. And that's what I want. I want people to start thinking outside the box, because that's what I do. And that's why I love the fair tax.
And back when I was a kid and we were running around on the beach and everything, and we didn't think about a piece of shell or another sharp object like part of a beer bottle or something. And when we ran through the sand to the ocean and everything, it was just commonplace. And then all of a sudden, we hit one of those sharp objects, and it was like, ow. So here we go with the whole 87,000 IRS agents. I think that's the stubbing of the toe for the American people. And now they're going, wait a minute, 87,000. And so how do we go and sort of stoke that fire that's there? What's the best way do you think that we can, now that we have a little bit of an attention on that whole process, what do you think is the best way to go about now that we have the ball in our court, so to speak? How do we go about letting people know in a big way that the fair tax, a tax on consumption, is better than the income tax?
Well, I think just the sheer fact that those 87,000 agents are not going to be going for the 1%, as people like to say. They're paying most of the taxes anyway. So we all know that those 87,000 agents are going to be coming after you and coming after me and all the small business owners who may have bought a truck for their business this year. And they're going to say, well, did you take the right deduction? Our 87 million pages of tax code. But, I was looking at the Inflation Reduction Act, which doesn't reduce inflation at all, really. It's just a deficit spending bill.
It was a marketing.
I know.
It's amazing how many bills have a title that is exact 180 degrees opposite of what the effect of the bill is going to be. We noted that a couple of weeks ago.
I know, it's so true. But here's an interesting thing. It doesn't necessarily talk about those 87,000 agents in the bill, but what it does talk about is all the funding that the IRS is going to get. Now, can I take a minute and I made a list of all the things.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted. You anticipated my next question. I know that you are a real student of figuring out what's in the bill rather than just taking the media's word for it. And I was going to ask you, what is in there that people need to know about that the media isn't telling them about?
Right. Well, and this goes to both of your questions. So I'm just gonna talk about the IRS for just a minute. And we all love that part about the fair tax, that we are essentially getting rid of the IRS. But here's just an example of what the Inflation Reduction Act gives to the IRS. Okay. $3,881,500,000 for taxpayer services, $45,637,400,000 for enforcement. 25,326,400. Wait a minute, I wrote that down wrong. Okay, 2,532,000,000. Oh no, wait a minute, I wrote that number wrong. That's okay, but that's for operational support.
Lots
big
of
numbers
zeros behind it.
Yeah, business systems. I was writing really fast when I wrote this. Business systems modernization, they're giving money for. They're giving money for $15 million for a feasibility study for the IRS. I mean, really, come on.
There was their total budget they're getting today.
Oh my goodness!
They're about the $15 million budget to prepare a report to go back to Congress.
Yeah, well, that's basically what it is. It's so dumb. And so I'll skip all the rest of the things I wrote down. But here is the total. The total just in this Inflation Reduction Act, $54,320,460,203. That's just like, it's unbelievable. And people need to know what those numbers are, because it's aggravating, and it gives people an understanding of how ridiculous and immoral our government is.
But I've looked at that, and some of the line items in that bill are greater than the entire IRS budget today. People don't understand how massive an increase in the size of the IRS this thing is going to be. And I think it was Steve Hayes the other day I was talking to, was making the point that you're right, they're not going to go after the 1%, because the 1% has the best lawyers, the best tax attorneys, and they know that, if they don't cross their T's and dot all their I's, the IRS is going to get after them. So they are more precise and more careful than anybody to make sure they don't make mistakes. And they've got the best team in the world helping them. So the 1% is not the evaders, because they know they're going to be looked at and get caught. You're right. It's going to be you. It's going to be me. It's going to be Scarborough. It's going to be small business owners like your buddy Jeb. That all these new agents are going to come after. Right. And people need to understand that.
But I'm going to be devil's advocate question for just a minute, because say that you say 87,000, and then the counter to that is always, well, there's attrition, there's retirement, they're filling in a gap that's been open for many, many years, who knows how many. I understand about the computer section, going from DOS 1.0 to Windows 11. That's a hell of a jump. I mean, but the whole thing, there always appears to be a counter to, well, no, the IRS isn't going to be, adding completely overnight 87,000 people. But first of all, where would they put all of them? Second, because they have so much filing paperwork that's in a lot of the places, including the cafeteria, which, in case you haven't seen the picture, it's really quite remarkable. They're using one of the cafeterias in the IRS building to place I guess they're doing their due diligence on some of those tax returns that they haven't been through. But I just
hanging file folders there.
We have 87,000, and so how do we counter? How is there a counter, or is it reality that they are looking at some of those 87,000 being filling in for retirement, or people that have left and they haven't replaced them over the years?
Well, I guess you could make the argument. I really don't want to argue with that, because I hate the IRS, and I don't think that the government needs to be knowing how much money we make. And so, I would, if you were a person coming at me with that question, I would say, why do we want the government bigger? Why do we want 87,000 more people working for the government and taking our tax dollars to get more tax dollars out of us to pay their own salaries? So I don't know.
We are paying them in our taxes. But that's the reply that is given a lot of times is, oh, well, it's not going to be 87,000 dumped into the bucket all at once. We're replacing, and what we just talked about. And I understand where you're coming from too, because my deal is, hey, let's just get rid of them altogether. Now you get to the politicians and the lobbyists and the folks in Washington that are more than likely, instead of pushing their foot on the gas to pass the fair tax, everybody's trying to figure out, how do I get in position to take advantage of a tax on consumption? Because I'm making a lot of money. I got a boat and a yacht and a couple of houses, and I got the wall to build around my, my house and all of these expenses. And I've come to this particular standard of living, and I don't want to give that up. So the folks that are already in Washington, D.C., I believe that they're sitting around trying to figure out, well, how are we, if this thing comes about, no matter whether it comes about today, tomorrow, with the inertia that we have behind in the current state of affairs in the country, how do we, this is the politician saying this, or the lobbyist, how are we going to get into position to make sure that we keep making the money that we're making under the new way of doing things with the fair tax, with a tax on consumption? That's what I think is going on.
You're probably right, because that's all people care about is money and power. That's why they don't want the fair tax.
Right, because, well, we got the status quo. We got all the levers pulled in the direction we want to, and it's, everything's running smoothly. It's on autopilot, so to speak. And we just have to keep, on the assembly line of all of that mess that includes the tax code and includes our elected officials and includes the lobbyists and special interests, et cetera. Yeah. So what I'm hoping is that when people get it at the local level, that they're going to be able to put enough power, grassroots power, behind a candidate that's willing to go step in. I believe truly at this particular cycle, maybe not by the next couple of months, but maybe between now and 2024, we have an opportunity to find someone, including the presidential candidates, because you want a fair tax president in office too. But I would think that would be any president, because they're always confounded by, why have I got to give up my tax returns? What's the big deal? I would think that all you had to do is say fair tax on consumption, the Internal Revenue Service goes away, and there'd be so many executive orders flying out of the White House that they would be like, hey man, this is fantastic. Why didn't we think about this before? Executive Order 1075.2, fair tax.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, as a constitutionalist now, I didn't mention this at the beginning. I'm no longer with the Republican Party. I actually am with the Constitution Party, and I fit much better there because I really am a strict constitutionalist. And the fact that the presidents try and rule the country via executive order drives me crazy. And the fact that Congress does nothing to stop them is wrong. And so I wouldn't want the president to enact the fair tax through an executive order, because that isn't constitutional.
Well, I understand that, but let me, okay, so I'll play devil's advocate on you on that one. So as a constitutionalist, is it more important for you to respect the Constitution, or would you like to get one more slap in there and get rid of the Internal Revenue Service?
Well, I think those can go hand in hand. Yes.
And I agree with you. The executive order, that whole mess that's happening, the separation of powers is so important to good governance and in the republic, the constitutional republic that we have, or do we at this moment in time?
Right.
I would argue that it's a lot of gray areas in that whole setup. But it takes people that understand that. And I was thinking while we were having that conversation about the Dixiecrat Party in the South, and when was it, Bob? The 50s, late 50s, mid 50s.
When I was playing with Legos and building blocks and stuff.
And I was not even born, but Strom Thurmond,
I definitely wasn't born.
Strom Thurmond he was a Democrat, but he ran on the Dixiecrat ticket that year, that whatever election it was, I can't remember. I wish I had all the information, historical information, but I think you have a shift in where people are. And like Marissa, like you just said, you left the Republican Party, you went to the Constitutional Party. So here's Strom Thurmond leaving the Democrat Party in the South because he disagreed with what was going on during that time, and went and ran for president on the Dixiecrat Party ticket. And so I think in our minds, as we wake up one morning and we're more libertarian than we are Republican, or we're more moderate Democrat, and then because they've moved the line so far to the left with the progressives, they're now that line, that center moderate line is now moved left a little bit, crossing people over into a more conservative viewpoint, a way of looking at things when they really didn't necessarily change their ideology. They just all of a sudden woke up one day and realized, well, but it ain't the same. And the same thing happens in the Republican Party too. I think we have people that have dug in on a particular level of position of ideology, and they say, well, we kind of like the way things are. And I think we see that in a lot of entrenched office holders in the Republican Party, that they need to be kind of dug in and taken out. And
Agreed.
I hope that people look at it, because it's hard to get enough votes with a third ticket to win.
Yeah.
You have to do it within the two-party system somehow, but to have the platform like that you have in the Constitution Party.
Our time's getting away from us here real quick. Marissa, let me ask you one more question. Have you ever run into anybody out there in your campaigning that said, well, the IRS isn't bothering me, I don't care? I mean, are you still seeing apathy out there, or are we really getting through that we need to get rid of the IRS and we need to get rid of it now?
I think that we're getting through. I really do. I have never heard anyone say that. Everyone that I have talked to about tax reform is dissatisfied with the current system. And so I think now is our time.
Well, I say our time's getting away from us. I want to give you a chance to comment a bit on the state of your race. Everybody knows that Liz Cheney heard the "you're fired" heard around the world a few weeks ago. Are you the only candidate out there running on the FAIRtax in your race?
Yes, sir. I am the only one that's running on the FAIRtax. And so I think that sets me apart. A lot of people aren't talking about tax reform except me.
All right. Well, are you getting some good traction out there? I know that, as Bob was saying a second ago, people tend to dismiss candidates from, quote, minor parties, even though the minor party candidates may have positions that resonate with the majority of people. And I think that's certainly the case in your case. But just comment on the state of your race here and how things are going.
Sure. They are still going. Mrs. Hageman, who bested, I almost called Liz Cheney Hillary Clinton. Oh my gosh.
Well, there's not a whole lot of difference.
She bested Liz Cheney in the primary. Ooh, it was a Freudian slip. Well, they both wear pantsuits, so what can you say?
There you go. Hey.
So, people are really considering her the winner already. And I like to tell people, absolutely not. This race is not over. There is opportunity for a third party candidate to win in Wyoming. And the more that I'm out talking to people, the more people are actually really glad to know that there is another choice other than the Democrat or the Republican. And so that gives me hope. And I say it's not over till it's over, because didn't you watch the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah.
That Rich Strike horse, he came up from the back and he took the race. So I say that's me.
See this Facebook message from your friend Jeb Hansen the other day saying that Harriet kind of offended some people out there in the primary. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I'm not entirely sure the context of what she would have offended them about. I don't know. If he didn't give you an example, it may have to. There's been some disagreement about some water, moving of water from one of our reservoirs to Colorado. There's been some back and forth in the media about what is true and what is not true. So that may have been part of it. I'm not sure.
Jeb is the guy that turned you on to the FAIRtax, and I met him as well. And he was saying, don't give up on Marissa. He said exactly the same thing. Don't give up on Marissa. She's still in the race and she's still got a shot at it.
I'm working really hard right now.
It comes down to name recognition too. And if you're going out one person at a time and you're shaking hands and you're being available and making yourself available, because I think candidates sometimes get into this box and their handlers don't let them have direct access to the voter in many conditions, not all, but in some. And so I think that's important. And name recognition, of course, being the big thing. And people see your name out there enough, hey, they're going to say, hey, And of course, with the stubbed toe of 87,000 IRS agents now being able to be on that platform that you have with the FAIRtax, I think there's great opportunity where there's going to be a lot of change happening in this next election and in the one in 2024 that I think a lot of people are going to shift around and not so much go for Republican, Democrat, Green, constitutional, libertarian, et cetera. I think they're going to start looking at issues more deeply and specifically that affect them. And by golly, it looks to me like the Internal Revenue Service is probably in the crosshairs of a lot more people than they were, say, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I would agree. We're having a debate coming up in October with all the candidates, and I certainly hope they ask us a question about tax reform. So I can't wait to talk about it on PBS.
You know it's coming. And we need to get up there with a FAIRtax banner, Bob.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll send. I'll if they still have any in the FAIRtax store, I'll send you one of those scrolling banners along with your supply of new palm cards. Now, there's a mailing address on your campaign website. I can use that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will talk with Mike Simmons as soon as we're done here, and I'll have him send you an assortment of stuff, maybe some stickers and definitely some palm cards, and we'll restock you, and we'll make the same offer to we'll make the same offer to any other candidate who wants to run on the FAIRtax as well. But we'll take care of you, my friend.
Awesome. I'll hand them out. You know it.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Marissa. Guys, great to finally meet you in person. I sure appreciate it. Look forward to having you in as a trivia question one day in the future. Who was the first FAIRtax Pledge signer? And I'll know the answer.
That's right. It's me. Thank you for having me on, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I certainly think that was appreciate you taking time to talk to us. I know you're busy out there. In fact, you're probably going to go out and hit and campaign some more this afternoon. Of course, you're 2 hours behind us. We're in the Eastern time zone, and you're back in. We're back there.
Mountain time.
Yeah, you've got the whole rest of the day to work with. I love you.
I'm going to read some more bills. That's what I'm going to do.
Oh well, don't get
ready
too
for that
depressed.
debate.
Yeah, well, get the one that's about the Disarm the IRS Act. Did you hear about that one? We found that on Congress.gov. We look at that every week, and actually, it was a congressman here in Florida that has filed this bill they call Disarm the IRS Act, and it was Matt.
I'm going to write that down.
Matt Gaetz who did that. You know, the IRS has bought an ungodly amount of ammunition. And Steve Hayes, again, we were talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and he says the only way they're going to collect these new taxes they're after is with guns. That's what the AFFT president said. So
don't let them take yours away.
Absolutely. So go check out the Disarm the IRS Act if you want something cool to read.
Fantastic.
Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Marissa, it is always a pleasure and an honor to talk to you. Wish you well in your campaign, and kind of keep us informed as to what's going on out there. The media here in Florida or the media there in North Carolina where Bob is doesn't necessarily keep up with Wyoming too well because it's so far away from us. But we aren't interested in keeping an eye on everything. And again, thank you so much for being the first candidate to sign the FAIRtax Candidate Pledge. Keep on trucking, and that is going to wrap this up. So we are the FAIRtax guys. Bob Paxton here, and you are
Scarborough,
and you are
Marissa Selvig.
Reminding you, as we always do, that the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So tell me how it works.
You know, it's probably changed since the last time I saw it, but the short answer would be, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Imagine bringing home everything you make. You don't get taxed for saving or accumulating wealth, and your boss doesn't get taxed more even if he pays you more.
Wow, now see, that's amazing.
So the end result of all that is the cost of producing products and running a business goes down, so things cost less. And on top of all that, imagine every criminal, non-citizen, and under-the-table worker also paying taxes.
That's amazing.
That's the FAIRtax.